Welcome to a new episode of NextGen Ninja. I'm your host, Kory Farooquie. On this show, I interview those enterprise and entrepreneurial leaders that are defining what the world looks like for future generations. We all know and understand that travel is an integral part of our everyday lives. But how we get from point A to point B is about to take a dramatic shift. For example, we are already seeing the penetration of autonomous vehicles and autonomous systems in all facets of our lives. From pizza delivery to package delivery, autonomous vehicles are here. And they're going to stay and they're going to grow. And as the global population reaches 8 billion and beyond, figuring out the efficient management of people becomes more and more important. This is the discussion today, not only about autonomous vehicles, but also smart cities. It's also a discussion about the smart hubs of travel, like airports that manage the people that are commuting from point A to point B. And what better way to discuss this topic than with someone who gets all of it and whose purview encompasses all of those things. My guest today is Paul Puopolo. He is the Executive Vice President of Innovation at the DFW Airport. Paul is a quintessential entrepreneur, bringing an entrepreneurial mindset into some of the largest legacy organizations that he's worked for. In the past, Paul has held leading roles at both MetLife and Humana. Before that, he served in the US Navy as a pilot for 22 years. And so, first and foremost, Paul, welcome to the show and thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's I look really forward to having this discussion with you as a resident of Dallas-Fort Worth myself. So what I'd like to share with the guests is maybe some eye-opening facts that even residents of Dallas may not know, but certainly people around the world that watch this show may not know. So Dallas-Fort Worth is the largest landlocked metropolitan area in the United States. It is also the fastest growing metropolitan hub in the US. And this growing metroplex is getting bigger and bigger, and it's already bigger than the state of New Jersey. That in itself is glaring. The DFW Airport that services both Dallas and Fort Worth and all of the different suburbs that comprise this metroplex has some glaring facts itself. It is the third largest airport in the world in terms of size. It is the fourth busiest airport in terms of flights and the 15th busiest in the world in terms of passenger. It's bigger than the island of Manhattan, making it a city in itself. And it's home to the world's largest airline, American Airlines. Not only that, but it is also the first and largest carbon neutral airport in the United States. So, Paul, with that, my first question to you is, as head of innovation for the DFW Airport, this role is so different than some of the roles that you've done in your past. So can you explain your role a bit and can you explain how you came into this role?
Sure. Well, that's true. DFW is a unique experience for me. It is truly a pure operational environment, which is very different than the financial sector that I was in and the healthcare sector that I was in. So when we think of testing and piloting solutions, you're actually going to impact customers in real time on a day-to-day basis, and you can really affect the operations of the airport as well. So we always want to make sure that we keep in mind safety and security at all times, but it creates a different challenge. We have 73 million people coming through every year through our airport, so it creates a unique opportunity to test and pilot. My role is to obviously build an innovation team and manage an innovation and lead an innovation function. DFW Airport's always been innovative, but they were looking at a way to standardize the way they approach new ideas, the way they look at emerging technologies, the way they solve problems. And so that's how I came into the role. And so I've been building an innovation team and an innovation process and strategy to define innovation for the airport. I've always loved working in large, complex organizations. I truly believe large companies can innovate. You just have to have the right leadership, you have to have the right process, and you have to have the right approach to how you're going to do innovation, because I think most innovators or most innovation leaders, you have a toolbox, but you have to apply that toolbox and that approach to that particular company's strategy and as well as that company's culture. And so that's what I'm doing here at DFW.
And this is a new role for you. I mean, you haven't been here too long.
That's right, 9 months.
9 months. So honeymoon phase is over.
It's over.
And now you are really applying your ideas and in your innovative ideas into an organization that is part government, part public, certainly a defining factor for the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and one of the reasons why people and corporations like Toyota and all these guys are moving here.
Right. Yeah, correct. It's been a great 9 months. It's definitely a learning curve, but the learning curve is over for me. I've got a brand new team, and that team is coming together. So not only are we trying to lead the culture of innovation at DFW, we're also trying to gel together as an innovation team, which has its own challenges as well. But we love it, and we're looking forward to doing some cool things at DFW to help our passengers have a great experience through DFW Airport.
Well, I can tell you, I've been in Dallas now almost 20 years, and as a consultant, when I've traveled 100% of the time, been to all over the U.S. My favorite towns were those with small airports because they would just make them so convenient, and I didn't want to deal with big airports. So, we take airports for granted. Some we describe as convenient, others we describe as nightmares, but we need them. I've always found that the DFW airport was built on in a very innovative way because you can literally just come to the terminal that you're at and park your car and valet your car or whatever and be in the flight. So most of us don't necessarily understand and appreciate the intensity of managing a giant operation like an airport that has so much riding on it. It's not just the function of an airport, but it's the lives of millions of people every day. Can you tell us briefly what it means to be innovative for an airport?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it goes back to how do you define innovation, and I think some of your previous speakers have even mentioned it. Innovation means different things to different people, and it's the same obviously with airports. It depends on how you determine what innovation what it means for your organization, and that's one of the roles I have, is to define it. So our number one priority is launching new products and services that are going to increase the consumer experience, increase revenue, or also make us operationally efficient. And so that's what we think innovation is. A lot of airports are doing great things around redesigning their terminals, and obviously we're building a brand new terminal as well. That is critical.
Including redesigning some of the existing ones.
Exactly, and that's critical to do it better. But when we look at innovation, we look at core business, we look at differentiating business, and we also look at transformation and revolutionary business. And so the work that you do has to be in that portfolio. So redoing a terminal is probably about core and differentiating, but we have to keep our eye on the transformative and the revolutionary business opportunities, such as autonomous vehicles, eVTOL and things like that, and biometric entry and exit, and how do we apply those new technologies to create either new business models or better experiences. So it all comes down to how do you define innovation for your particular organization. And as you said, DFW is unique because we have different terminals that are designed with their own checkpoints and designed with their own parking garages to make it easier for consumers to come and go. That also causes greater operational constraints as well. So you have to balance both. But it also makes us a great place to pilot and test things because we can test things in a very specific terminal, at a very specific checkpoint, in a very specific baggage area, without disrupting the entire operation of all 5 terminals.
So, so the way I look at this is I can't wait till some of the stuff that you're thinking gets into play and we can go back to, hey, I got there 15 minutes before my flight, because I'm that person.
Well, we want you to hang around in the terminal, though.
Oh, hey.
we want you to enjoy your time in the terminal.
Absolutely. Well, that's a very good thing that you brought up, right? Because hanging out in the terminal, as kids, flight was kind of like this, it's a cool thing, going to the airport.
Right.
It was different. And today, airport and air travel, especially for the travel, road warriors, is an inconvenience. And so part of the thing is, as you mentioned, the security checkpoints. Right. It's, since 9/11, it's obviously very different.
Sure.
And so a lot of the innovative ideas you're bringing into the table and hopefully implementing will bring that seamless experience back.
We hope so, and that's the intent. At DFW, we have 60% of our travelers are connecting. So we have to balance both. We have to make it streamlined and efficient for the connecting passengers to get what they want and to go from one terminal to the next in order to cut through DFW. And we want them to pick DFW as their connecting airport because it's so seamless. But then we also have to consider the 40% that are originating or have Dallas or Fort Worth as a destination. And so what do they need, and how do we make their experiences entertaining as well as streamlined? And that's the balance that we have to play at all the time with the business and our business partners.
That's great. That's great. I look forward to this new beginning with you there. I have seen some innovation in the past. For example, the shuttling between terminals with the rail system that's developed. So, as a DFW airport, and coming from the world of financial services and insurance, but focusing on innovation, I'm assuming you're a very sought after person, obviously, and I've had the pleasure of seeing some of your panels that you've been on. Where do you see the DFW airport today in terms of innovation? Where do you see yourself taking it? And we're going to dive a little bit more into the exact things, but as a current checkpoint, no pun intended in terms of an airport, but where are we today in terms of innovation for DFW Airport?
As I said, DFW has always been innovative. They've done some great things. We also have won some great awards. We won Airport of the Year, and we won Best North American Airport, and we're the first carbon neutral airport. So there's been a lot of great things, and obviously operationally, we're doing something right. Or you don't win those awards. So that's great on the airport. And that goes back to the definition of innovation. What do you want innovation to do? So innovation needs to be tied to your corporate strategy. And is your corporate strategy to be a destination? Is it to be a transportation hub? Is it to be a community? Or part of all three? And so innovation is going to link to all of that. My time right now, in the short time I've been at DFW, has been to improve the culture of innovation at DFW, because we are operationally efficient. We are fantastic at that. And now we need to start to inject some of the creativity, some of the standardized processes and how you look at a new idea and how do you prioritize an idea, how do we assess emerging technologies, and how do those technologies going to affect the consumer experience. Those are the things, that rigor around the process is what we're focused on. And then on the culture side, training and educating our team on design thinking, on lean startup. How do we work with a startup? What processes and things have to change in order for us to be a better partner to the community as well, the community entrepreneurial community. So those are all the things that we have to do as far as innovation, where I'd like to take DFW. I just hope that other airports will see what we're doing and look at what we're doing and then say they're a good partner.
Well, I certainly hope so too. And as a matter of fact, you and I met at the Dallas Startup Week.
That's right.
So it was awesome seeing somebody that is going to be heading up innovation for the airport be part of the mix in a startup ecosystem. So that's a very interesting point that you bring up about focusing the initial part by building the foundation of the culture of innovation. All right. So what I'd like to do is maybe move a little bit into, as an airport, as an entity, as a business. Every business has some competitors. So, whereas we may think that, hey, it's an airport, it's not going anywhere. We're certainly not building a giant airport like DFW again. Who knows? But the DFW Metroplex is growing bigger than the state of New Jersey. It's like saying New Jersey has one giant airport. Not only in terms of air travel, but travel itself is going to change. Hyperloops, bullet trains, even autonomous vehicles that, I decide, I'm just going to hop in my autonomous RV and just go somewhere, or autonomous vehicle and just go somewhere. I don't need to take a flight. What are the competition? What competition do you see an airport facing? And, how are you addressing those needs from keeping the airport competitive?
Right. I think that goes back to what is the vision of an airport? And I think there'll never be, or at least not in the short term, at least in the next 10 years in my mind, there won't be anything that's going to replace international air travel for right now, and at least in the foreseeable future. So long distance travel, I think, is going to stay the same. So in that respect, the airport, will always be there. But regional travel, to your point, is going to change, and that is like less than 150 miles. So when you're traveling less than 150 miles, technology is going to change that dynamic of mobility. And I think as an airport, or airports need to decide, what business are you in? Are you in the airport business? Are you, again, in the destination business? Are you in the transportation hub business, or a combination of all of them? And we see ourselves right now as keeping up with all the technology to maintain our position as a major transportation hub, to be that connector, obviously for communities and people to the rest of the world, and obviously to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So when you look at that and you come up with your vision, then you say, okay, where are the disruptors in that entire chain and in that entire ecosystem? And so if you're a transportation hub, you're going to look at things very differently than if you're a destination, and your competitors will be different. So that's how we look at it. I think mobility as a service is going to change, and it's going to force us to change. And that's why we're excited about the work we're doing with autonomous vehicle, the pilots we have coming up to do that. As I think you may know, we're one of the sites for Uber Elevate, which is an eVTOL, and we're going to be testing that hopefully next year. So I feel like we're pretty good positioned to test these new technologies, and we've got some studies going on congestion and how traffic is monitored, and how you apply autonomous vehicles to change those traffic patterns. So there's a lot that we're doing that I think we can apply not only to DFW but also to the community around that information.
So that is a great segue into the next question, which is, what is your vision for the DFW Airport as potentially the model for major airports, not only in the U.S. but all over the world, in terms of creating those efficiencies, implementing new technologies that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I hope that other airports or even industries will look at us, and not so much about what we are doing, but it's how we do what we do. And that's the focus that DFW has, thanks to the executive team, on innovation. So we've put a very strong focus on innovation and defining its strategy, its process, and how we're going to take things to market, and how we're going to identify problems and look and assess emerging technologies. That being said, we're also taking a strong look at how we build partnerships with the local ecosystem, whether it's our airline partners or whether it's the entrepreneurial community. And at the same time, I hope people will look at how they've assessed technology, because the challenge with airports is technology is great, but we don't want to chase technology for technology's sake. We need to make sure we're solving a problem. And I think we're taking a very disciplined approach at technology and how it can make things simpler and more efficient for people, but we don't want to lose the human touch as well. So understanding consumers and different segments of consumers and how they want to adapt to digital technology, but when they also want a human touch point, that's the uniqueness of an airport. So I'm hoping that other airports will look at us as a model and say, this is how they've applied innovation, this is how they've looked at technology, and then take that and use that for their own strategy and for their own within their own markets.
That's great. I'd love to understand a little bit more about some of these sci-fi futuristic things. I mean, tell us about what you're doing with Uber Elevate. Maybe even talk about what that is.
Sure.
For our viewers that maybe haven't heard, and what you're doing with autonomous vehicles. What's your vision for the next 5-10 years for this airport?
Sure. I think autonomy, and when we say autonomous technologies, we think of autonomous technologies across the board, not just for passengers or for transporting people. There's autonomous technology for our passenger bridges, which we're exploring. There's autonomous technology for cargo and for moving packages and even moving bags behind the scenes. So there's a lot of need for autonomous technology. As far as Uber Elevate goes, right now we're kind of working with them to define what the future is going to be. There's no question that the technology is there, but where the challenges are is what's the infrastructure need to be to support that type of aircraft, if you call it an aircraft, right? So there's a lot of work that we have to do, whether it's piloted or autonomous. It's a unique aircraft, which is going to generate a different way of getting from point A to point B less than 100 miles. So if you think of people going from Frisco or Plano and having to get to the airport in 15 minutes, you can now take an Uber Elevate. But our challenges are, where will they go? How will we service them? The power grid that needs to support that battery and to charge those vehicles in a short amount of time. These are the infrastructure challenges that we have, but they're exciting for us as an airport to help solve.
It's because since residents of DFW, we love to say, as I mentioned, our airport is as big as Manhattan. Mm-hmm. But what you really are doing is, you're no different than, I would say, the head of innovation for a city that's there, it's existent, it has millions of people coming in and out, a transit city, if you will. Right. What does that look like? What is that future? So modeling the DFW Airport as a city itself for other smart cities to focus on. Mm-hmm. What are the comparisons that you can make between the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport and, say, a bustling city that has that many people moving in and out? What is your vision for smart cities in the future?
That's a loaded question. Just out of the gate, physically, just to compare, DFW, obviously, we have our own zip code. We have our own fire support, police. We have our own medical operation. We've got 2 golf courses, 3 hotels, parking garages, and then we have our own challenges too, much like the cities do. We have transportation challenges, we have congestion challenges, we have recycling challenges, we have power grid challenges, we have Wi-Fi and connectivity challenges. So when we look at the airport, we look at it as a microcosm of the cities that surround us. So that makes us a great test bed for new technologies. But at the same time, we can share the same problems. And so when we look at smart cities, I tend to look at it in buckets. You need asset management, or you need to be able to manage your infrastructure. You need to look at sustainability and the sustainability issues. And then you have all mobility challenges. And then you have another bucket probably around consumer experience and solutions like that. And to solve those, you need to think about connectivity. You need to think about the network and interoperability. So how is 5G going to work?
Yeah.
What happens with 4G? What about fiber optics? How secure do these networks have to be, and how do you work with your partners to deliver those things? Because that's what the future of all those sensors have to make it work. So there's things that we're exploring there. At the same time, you have to say, okay, now that we're getting all this data, how is that data going to be captured? How's it going to be managed? And
how's it going to be leveraged?
How's it going to be leveraged? So that's where AI comes in and machine learning. How are we going to process all this data to make it valuable and also make it more predictive and proactive for us to manage the airport more efficiently? We need to take that data and be a little bit more predictive. And then lastly, you have, how are you going to tie all that together to add value to the consumer? So you need to have transportation solutions from beginning to end. You need to have recycling solutions that make sense from beginning to end. So it's this tying of the digital world with the physical world.
Sure.
That is the challenge. And where do consumers see value? And that is, I think, parallel to what cities are trying to do.
And for those our audiences that may be in city management type worlds, this is a great discussion for them to understand an example. So, real quickly, do you have some kind of a model that you're kind of taking from and saying this is what we need to be like?
I think we're keeping an eye on other smart cities and other things that are being developed around smart cities. We are definitely tied into the Dallas ecosystem around what they're doing with their smart city lab, and so we're keeping an eye on what happens there. We have strong relationships with the new CIO of Dallas.
Sure.
We've talked about how do we become better partners to collaborate on solutions. So if they're doing something in the city, can we also do it at the airport, and vice versa? If we come up with something and I know it's a city problem, can they apply it there? And the same with Fort Worth. So I think we're keeping an eye on the bigger market and what people are doing across the country around the use of smart technologies. But I think smart cities is still pretty new. And I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to data and how you're going to process and manage all that data and keep that data secure. Data
is certainly the fuel of the future. And, on this show, I have had the opportunity to have interviews with people and innovators that are coming from different worlds, but data is certainly the underlying fuel for all of the different innovation and innovative technologies that are out there. So we're almost running out of time. There's a bunch of different questions I want to go through real quickly. In terms of a hype, this is certainly not a hype. We're at, I believe, an inflection point where it's no longer talk of hype and talk of sci-fi. It's here to stay. Autonomous vehicles, autonomous systems, seeping into our lives. How the airport will manage transit passengers, maybe more. What is the urgency for, say, a government institution and a public services entity like the DFW Airport? And what is the urgency for a corporate, private sector to innovate? Can you talk a little bit about the urgency to innovate, taking into account some of your past experiences and your current?
Yeah, urgency is a great term. I think with any innovation, a company has to decide whether it's going to truly spend time on innovating or not. And I think any company that's not spending resources or putting people or budget into innovation is going to have a lot of challenges in the future. But innovation can be defined differently for every company, and they have to decide, what does that mean? Do they want to be a fast follower, or do they want to be leading edge? But you definitely need, and I'm biased, you definitely need somebody accountable for innovation. And it doesn't have to be a chief innovation officer. It could be marketing, it could be new product development, it could be corporate ventures, but somebody in the company has to be responsible for the future and has to be responsible for new business and what might disrupt that business. I think companies that say it's everybody's responsibility to innovate means nobody's innovating.
Right.
You have to have accountability, and I think that's what companies need to do. And you need a leadership team that understands how innovation can add value. And so they understand innovation versus innovation theater. And they understand P&L versus taking managed risks. And I think sometimes the larger companies are very focused on the operational P&L of today, and they have a hard time looking at what the future P&L could be. So no matter what it is that you're being disrupted, whether it's fintech disrupting the incumbents, whether it's medical device companies that are getting into more of the healthcare space, or hospitals having their own insurance, or whether it's transportation and autonomous vehicles changing the way we get from one place to the next. Companies have to focus on it, and they have to put some type of resource or some type of commitment to it. Or
it's not a time where you can be complacent.
Correct.
You have to look at innovation. You have to be innovative, and I love the fact that you have to what you're doing, which is creating the culture for innovation. It's so important. So. This last quick wrap up of this episode, some of the things, I have these 3 questions I love to ask my my guests that are the innovators that I call NextGen ninjas. So first is, of course, what does it take to be an innovator like you? What does it take to be a NextGen ninja?
Well, NextGen is a great term. I applaud you for that term, but it's a little intimidating. For me, it's always been about
own it.
Yeah, it's always been about passion and perseverance. I think to be an innovator, particularly in a large organization or an entrepreneur, you better have a lot of passion. You better have that sense of urgency. You need to come to work with being okay with the gray area. You need to be able to fight the status quo. You need to love it, because there's going to be a lot of challenges along the way. And that's when the perseverance comes in. Every company is going to have pushback. It's just the way it is. They do things successfully, and so it's hard to change. And you're going to have to be willing to kind of change policies, or get into it with the regulations, or have some areas just say, this is my space, and then you have to kind of convince and work together. So you have to have both. You have to have the passion and the perseverance to get it done.
And, on the opening comments of the first episode, what I love to talk about, this fighting the status quo, right. What I call the NextGen ninjas, people like you, the innovators, that would have been burnt at the stake 500 years ago if they were building ships to prove that the Earth wasn't flat. Right. The status quo doesn't get you anywhere.
It won't.
So that's a great point. So your vision. As a futurist, as an innovator, and some people don't like that term, but you have this purview that maybe others don't. What does that world look like 5 years? Mm-hmm. That's a near future, right. Maybe not so far away. 10 years, 15 years.
Right. I'm definitely not a futurist, but I can definitely have an opinion of what might be happening over the next 5 to 10 years. I think you've seen. Over the next 10 years, I think urbanization is going to continue. I think 60% of the world's population is going to be in urban areas. The median age is going to increase, so we're going to live longer. Generation Z is going to be an active consumer.
Yeah.
They're going to be in it with the millennials, and so they are digital natives. And so if you're looking at business, this is the way we live and the way we work and the way we buy and consume is going to change. And that means, obviously, the way you travel and go from one place to the next is going to have to come along with it. I think autonomous technology is going to really take off. That's going to be the hockey stick climb on the chart over the next 5 to 10 years. I think autonomous technology is going to will get proven out. I think we're going to see the adoption of eVTOL in the next 10 years. We're going to see new ways for people to commute and new personal mobility. And with that, you'll see cities build maybe autonomous vehicle districts where that becomes commonplace. And with all of that technology and with all that autonomy, jobs are going to change.
Sure.
People will be affected by that, but also new business models will be created. And I think when you look at vehicles and transportation, I have to think of my background in insurance. That's all going to change too. So autonomous vehicles or autonomous technology is going to change a lot, but I think it's going to be here, and then we have to be ready to handle it.
Well, just the other day I saw Pizza Hut and Domino's both testing autonomous delivery of pizzas. So it's going to seep into our lives. This is it's definitely not the talk of science fiction anymore. It's here. It's here to stay. It's only going to grow. So, Paul, any closing remarks for those in our audience that are listening, that are wanting to innovate, that are trying to innovate, that are trying to understand what it means to be an innovator and work with the risks as well?
I think you just have to have the right attitude to go into it. Don't be challenged by what might face you. There's always going to be barriers, and you just have to face them and go through them. So have the passion, have the perseverance, and I'm always happy to talk to folks about their strategies and their approaches to innovation. There's always something to learn. So look me up, and I appreciate the time.
Awesome. So any place where the viewers and the listeners can go to understand what's next in terms of the DFW Airport?
Sure, I would go to dfw.com or follow us on Facebook. Follow the DFW Airport on Facebook and social media, and you can see the latest and greatest.
Awesome. Well, I certainly will. Paul, it's been a great conversation. I've taken some notes. We talked about what does it mean to define innovation and the culture of innovation, how important it is as a foundation to then move forward. Talking about smart cities, the models around building experience. I love what you said about, you're either going to be a fast follower or be on the leading edge. Those are the only two choices. Otherwise, you're a laggard. You don't have the opportunity, and you may fail. I always say, you want to be the one that saved your enterprise and not the last one that could have, right? So this is falls perfectly in line with that. And really the passion and urgency that you have to fight the status quo. It's a key ingredient to be an innovator. And then obviously, the hockey stick of autonomous systems and autonomous vehicles. So I really enjoyed our conversation, Paul. Thanks so much for making the time for us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, this has been a great discussion with Paul. It's another episode of NextGen Ninja. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel and any of the favorite podcast platforms just by searching NextGen Space Ninja. Let me know how we're doing. We're a few episodes in. I'm really curious to get feedback. If you'd like to learn more about Paul, about what the DFW Airport is doing, or about the past guests or even the future guests, go to the website www.nextgen.ninja. You can also follow the show on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter by searching the hashtag NextGenNinja. Again, I'm your host, Kory Farooquie. My Twitter handle is @KFarooquie. And thank you for listening. And as always, stay future focused.